It began with a laugh, one sharp, careless laugh that echoed across the polished floor of the war room and made every officer inside briefly turn their head. The general hadn't meant anything by it, at least that's what he would say later. But in that moment, he smirked, crossed his arms, and asked the young woman standing by the door, "And what rank might you be, Lieutenant? Or are you just visiting for the snacks?" The room erupted with hushed chuckles, subtle smirks, and the kind of amused glances senior officers exchanged when a newcomer stepped into territory far above her pay grade. And that is where the story begins. Welcome back to United War, where today's story takes us deep into the heart of the most secure briefing chamber in the country, a place where jokes should never be made, and where the wrong question asked to the wrong person can change everything. Because on this day, the general didn't realize he was speaking to someone who outranked him by more than a little. Someone whose presence in that room wasn't an accident or a courtesy. She was there because she had been summoned. Her name was Maya Rios, and when she stepped inside the war room, she didn't carry the posture of someone trying to impress anyone. She walked with the quiet composure of someone who had seen more than most of the men inside could imagine. She wore a simple, unassuming uniform with no notable decorations other than a small, almost invisible pin near her collar. To everyone else, it looked irrelevant, some obscure unit patch or commemoration pin. But one man in that room recognized it instantly. He didn't speak yet. He watched. He waited, and he felt his throat tighten, because that one small symbol represented a unit that officially did not exist, and within that non-existent unit, only one woman in American history had ever risen to the level that pin signified. But the general didn't see any of that. He only saw a woman who looked too young, too calm, too ordinary to be standing in a room where global decisions were made. "Come on," he added with a grin. "Just tell us your rank. We'll try not to fall out of our chairs." The officers laughed again. Maya didn't. She studied the room, the monitors displaying satellite feeds, the maps of active operations, the rows of admirals and commanders analyzing classified intel. The war room was a place where tension normally sat like static in the air, but right now the only tension came from the general's smug voice and the anticipation building in the silence that followed. She finally spoke, her voice calm, unhurried, and controlled. "General," she said, "if my rank mattered, you would already know it." Her tone wasn't confrontational, it wasn't defensive, it was simply a fact, stated with the confidence of someone who had nothing to prove. And for the first time since she entered, the room went still. Officers exchanged puzzled glances, the joking expressions fading ever so slightly. The general raised an eyebrow, not yet understanding what was happening. "Is that so?" he said. "Well then, enlighten us." Maya didn't answer him directly. Instead, she stepped forward, placed a classified dossier on the central table, and calmly initiated the biometric access sequence on the war room's command interface. A red warning flashed for a second, access restricted, top tier only, before immediately switching to green. The system recognized her. The locks clicked open. The entire command interface lit up, granting her full authorization. And that's when the air in the room changed. Admirals sat up straighter. Commanders stared in disbelief. The general's smirk slowly faded, replaced with uncertainty. Because only 7 people in the entire country had clearance to unlock that system. And she was one of them. Then it happened. The moment that would replay in the minds of everyone present for years. From the far end of the room, one of the oldest and highest-ranking admirals stood abruptly, his chair scraping across the floor. He walked forward, studying the small pin near her collar more closely. His eyes widened, and without hesitation, without a word, he snapped to attention and delivered a sharp, formal salute. The war room froze. The admirals stared in shock. One by one, almost instinctively, almost fearfully, every admiral in the room rose from their seats and saluted her. The general's face drained of color.
He glanced left and right, confused, embarrassed, and suddenly aware he had just mocked someone who was not only above him in rank, but above almost everyone in the building. Maya finally looked at him, not with anger, not with arrogance, simply with a quiet, steady gaze that said everything. The joke he had made moments earlier now hung over him like a weight he couldn't escape. And the question every officer in that room silently asked themselves was the same. Who exactly was she? Why had she been summoned here? And what level of authority did she carry that could make admirals rise to their feet without hesitation? But the truth was only beginning. The war room hadn't called her in for a courtesy briefing. They hadn't summoned her because of rank or decorum. They called her because something had happened, something urgent, dangerous, and classified far beyond the general's clearance, something only she had the experience to handle, and the war room was about to learn.
The war room settled again, but the air was no longer casual. Everyone's eyes, generals, admirals, strategists, even civilian analysts, were pulled toward the mystery woman standing near the main holotable. Ilara didn't blink, didn't smirk, didn't act offended. She simply stood, like someone who had lived through things none of them could guess. The general who had joked earlier, General Pierce, cleared his throat and tried to regain control of the moment. "All right, Commander Ilara." He emphasized the title like he still didn't fully believe it. He gestured to the main screen. A digital map unfolded. Coastlines, heat signatures, live drone footage from a classified black zone. "We're preparing for Operation Stormglass," he explained. 3 teams deployed, 1 missing. We suspect hostile contact from a group we believed disbanded. He paused. "Ever heard of the Eclipse Unit?" But when he said the name, Ilara didn't just react. Her jaw tightened, almost imperceptibly. It was the first emotion anyone had seen on her face. Admiral Rowan noticed. His eyes narrowed. "You know them." It wasn't a question. Ilara spoke calmly, but her words were edged with steel. "I more than know them. I dismantled one of their forward branches with a 6-person recon squad before they reformed into whatever this is." The entire table stilled. A 6-person squad taking out an Eclipse forward cell was impossible, improbable, insane. Unless General Pierce sat down slowly, not from exhaustion, from understanding. She wasn't just a commander. She was a ghost from the classified files, a name whispered but never written. Admiral Rowan tapped the table. A side panel opened, showing restricted mission logs. Most remained blurred, blacked out, inaccessible. But one line appeared. Operation Spectre Throat. Mission lead, C. Ilara. The admirals exchanged glances. Everyone had heard of Spectre Throat. It was the mission used in training lectures as a theoretical scenario, a story of extreme precision, 0 casualties, and an enemy base wiped clean in under 19 minutes. Everyone thought it was fabricated. Ilara turned away from the screen and spoke with disarming simplicity. "Your missing team? They didn't get lost." She zoomed in on a set of satellite images. She highlighted discrete shapes, figures hidden under thermal cloaks, only visible when she toggled the specialized frequency overlay. A software no one had even known was installed. Whispers rippled through the room again. General Pierce finally asked the question everyone else was too afraid to speak. "Commander, just who trained you?" She didn't turn. She didn't hesitate. Admiral Jackson Hale. The room froze. Someone gasped. The youngest officer actually dropped his stylus. Every admiral went silent. Completely. Utterly silent. Because Admiral Hale wasn't just any mentor. He was a legend. A shadow. The man who trained only 6 operatives in his lifetime. 6 names. 6 ghosts. And every single one of them was classified at the highest level. General Pierce whispered, almost reverently, "You're one of the 6 ravens." Ilara finally turned, eyes sharp. "I didn't come here to impress anyone." She tapped the screen again. "I came because if we don't act now, you'll lose an entire division before nightfall." Her tone wasn't dramatic. It was mathematical. A certainty. Pierce swallowed. Rowan leaned forward. And all at once, the energy in the room shifted. They weren't evaluating her anymore. They were relying on her. "Show us," Admiral Rowan said quietly. "Show us how to win this." And just like that, Commander Ilara stepped into the circle of generals and admirals, not as an outsider, not as a joke, but as the invisible force the military had forgotten it had. She took command without raising her voice, and the war room followed, because they finally understood. They hadn't brought her in. She had allowed herself to walk in.
Commander Ilara stood at the center of the war room, surrounded by high-ranking officers who, minutes earlier, had doubted her very presence. Now they watched her with the focus of soldiers, staring at the only light in a collapsing tunnel. The holographic battlefield glowed beneath her fingertips. Everyone waited. Admiral Rowan finally broke the silence. "Commander, the floor is yours." Ilara nodded once, not with arrogance, not with theatrics, but with the quiet confidence of someone who had spent more time behind enemy lines than in conference rooms. She zoomed into the map. 3 layers of terrain rose in shifting digital contours, mountain passes, coastal inlets, and a dense forest marked as a red zone. "Your missing division," she began, "is here, pinned between a ridgeline they can't cross and an Eclipse kill team sweeping the valley." General Pierce leaned forward, surprised. "Sweeping? Eclipse doesn't sweep, they ambush." She looked at him. "They do when they want hostages." A cold wave drifted through the room. No one liked the idea of Eclipse taking prisoners. She tapped again, highlighting narrow choke points in the mountains. "They'll bottle up your men in this funnel, and when night falls," she swiped her hand, the map turned black except for red dots closing in on a cluster of blue, "then they'll vanish with them." The tension in the room snapped like a cable under strain. Admiral Rowan asked, voice low, "What's your counter?" Ilara switched the map to a thermal overlay, an angle none of her analysts had used. A hidden path lit up, a path no satellite had flagged because it was covered by camouflage mesh. General Pierce frowned. "That trail doesn't exist." Ilara raised her eyebrow. "It does, and Eclipse used it last winter. I watched them do it." Every head turned sharply. "Watched? As in she was there?" But there was no time to question her past now. She continued, "Your extraction teams will never get through heavy terrain in time. Your drones are being jammed. Your air support will trigger their counter-radar nets." Pierce exhaled. "Then what do we have left?" Ilara stepped back, folding her arms as the hologram shifted. "Me." The room went completely still, not in disbelief, but in realization. Ilara approached the map again. "I infiltrate through the mesh path. I break their comms relays here and here." 2 red nodes blinked. "Once their comms drop, their sweep halts. They freeze." Rowan nodded slowly. "And then our strike teams move in?" Ilara shook her head. "No. You hold your teams back until I confirmed Phase 2. Pierce's eyebrows shot up. "Phase 2? She zoomed deeper into the enemy formation. A symbol flickered, a masked insignia, black and silver. Every admiral in the room stiffened. "They have a Raven Killer unit embedded." The words hung like smoke. A Raven Killer, one of the few enemy squads designed specifically to hunt operatives like her. The scrambling began. Generals whispering, tacticians analyzing, officers scanning through files. Pierce slammed his fist on the table. "We can't send you in alone against that." Ilara looked at him, steady, composed. "You don't send me. I go." Her tone wasn't disrespectful, it was factual. Rowan studied her for a long moment, trying to read the unreadable. Finally, he asked, "What's the real objective, Commander? Just extraction?" Ilara's jaw tightened. "No." She pressed her palm to the table. A hidden layer of data flickered to life, encrypted red. Only Admirals had clearance for that file, yet she accessed it effortlessly. A name appeared. Ghost Protocol, Device Sigma. The room spun with confusion. General Pierce gasped louder than he intended. "Sigma? That's not possible. It's a myth." Ilara shook her head. "It's not a myth. Eclipse stole the prototype 3 days ago." Rowan's voice cracked with disbelief. "Why weren't we told?" Ilara spoke with the tone of someone who had lived through too many classified failures. "Because Sigma wasn't on your books." Every Admiral exchanged a stunned glance. That meant only one thing. A program above their clearance had activated her. She continued. "Sigma isn't a weapon. It's a trigger. If Eclipse deploys it, you won't just lose a division. You'll lose a coastline." The officers around the table froze in dread. The war room, which once felt tense, now felt like a sinking submarine. And Ilara, the calm in the storm, looked at them with silent urgency. "You need me on the ground, and you need me now." Rowan swallowed. Pierce clenched his jaw. Finally, Admiral Rowan gave the order. "Commander Ilara, we're authorizing full operational control." Pierce added quietly, "Name your team." Ilara shook her head. "No team." "Why not?" Rowan asked. Her reply chilled every man in the room. "Because if a Raven killer is in the valley, they're hunting me." The room went silent once more, and everyone understood. The enemy didn't ambush a random division. They set a trap. For her. Admiral Rowan stepped back, breath unsteady. "God help them, if they actually find you."
Night had already swallowed the valley by the time Commander Ilara reached the base of the ridge. The moon hid behind clouds, the air thick with the distant echo of suppressed gunfire. Every step she took was deliberate, soundless, precise, practiced. This wasn't her first infiltration, but it was the first time she knew the enemy was waiting for her. She scanned the tree line with night optics. 3 heat signatures. Stationary. Disciplined. Raven killers. They were positioned like a chess trap, and she was expected to walk in like a pawn. Ilara crouched, unholstered her suppressed sidearm, and whispered to herself, "You trained on me, but you never trained with me." A rustle flickered behind her. She didn't turn. She dropped flat, slid under a fallen log, and watched a shadow figure pass inches from her boots, silent, deadly. Raven killers didn't speak, didn't hesitate. Ilara waited until he was 3 meters past. One swift movement. She hooked his ankle, pulled him down, and pressed the muzzle to the base of his skull. Down. 2 left. She climbed the mesh-covered path, slipping through the enemy's invisible back door. She moved with the grace of someone who didn't just know the terrain, she remembered it. Every rock, every tree, every blind corner she once survived. She reached the comm relay tower, a black steel structure disguised beneath camouflage and vines. A perfect trap location. She knelt, planted a silent charge, and whispered into her mic. "War room, Phase 1 complete. Relay is rigged." Admiral Rowan's voice crackled faintly. "Proceed to Phase 2. Extraction teams ready." Ilara didn't answer, because the moment she stood, a figure dropped behind her. The second Raven killer. He moved with terrifying speed, tackling her into the dirt.
Her rifle skidded across the gravel. He struck viciously, a blow aimed to collapse her windpipe. She blocked with her forearm, rolled, and countered. His elbow cracked. He didn't scream. Of course he didn't. He kneed her ribs. She tasted blood. Ilara reached for the knife strapped to her thigh. Too slow. He slammed her hand into the ground. He leaned close, mask glinting, and whispered the first word she ever heard a Raven killer speak. Raven. Her old code name. Her past. Her identity they were bred to eliminate. She smiled through bruised lips. Wrong bird. She headbutted him, seized his knife mid-strike, and drove it up beneath his vest. One left. But the last one wasn't hiding. He was already waiting at the canyon overlook. A tall silhouette. A commander. The leader of the Raven Killers. He didn't step forward, didn't attack. He spoke softly in the tone of someone who had read her entire classified life. You were supposed to die in the winter strike. Ilara walked toward him, breathing steady. I got bored. He tilted his head. They rebuilt us, improved us. Your tactics won't work anymore. She shrugged. Mine evolved too. They clashed, the sound of steel ringing into the cold night air. Strike, block, counter. He was fast, but she was faster where it mattered, not in strength, but in prediction. She adapted mid-fight. He didn't. She caught his wrist, twisted, disarmed, and pinned him against a boulder. He spat out bitter truth. Sigma will launch whether you stop us or not. She leaned in. Not tonight. She triggered the silent charge remotely. Thwump. No fire. No explosion. Just the quiet collapse of their entire relay system. Their sweep froze. Their net fell. The trap division finally had an opening. Her voice crackled into the war room. Phase 2. Move. Cut 2. The war room. When her signal came through, the entire command center erupted into motion. General Pierce shouted orders. Tacticians deployed units. Drones reconnected. The division in the valley began to retreat through the gap she'd opened. Admiral Rowan stared at her data feed in disbelief. She did it. Alone. Another admiral shook his head. That wasn't doing it. That was mastery. Back to the valley. Ilara chased the Raven Killer leader as he limped toward a secondary device buried under rock. Sigma. She shot the detonator out of his hand. He froze. It's over, she said quietly. He gave a strange, defeated laugh. We were told you were dead. Ilara turned away. Start updating your intel. She cuffed him, dragged him out, and signaled for extraction. A Black Hawk swept overhead, sunlight finally breaking through the clouds as dawn crept into the valley. The moment she stepped onto the landing zone, the division she saved rose to their feet, hundreds of Rangers forming a line. And then they saluted. Not because of her rank, not because of an order, but because she had earned something far greater, their respect. Cut 2. The war room, moments later. The doors burst open. She walked in, exhausted but composed. General Pierce straightened his uniform. Admiral Rowan stepped toward her in silence. All the admirals, every one of them, rose to their feet and saluted as one. A gesture rarely given. A gesture reserved only for legends. General Pierce whispered, Commander, or whatever rank you truly hold, We owe you more than we can ever repay." Ilara gave a faint, tired smile. "Just doing my job." Rowan shook his head. "No, you did the job of a dozen teams." She looked at them. Leaders, warriors, skeptics now turned believers. "The next time," she said quietly, "send a dozen teams." The room burst into laughter, relief and awe mixing with admiration. And for the first time in years, Ilara felt something she never allowed herself to feel.